So back to part 2 of the green world, the beginning. So let's continue with part 2. As the crawlers ventured outward, they found other pools, larger than those at the edge of the sea. Here life was a little easier, not often subjected to the unexpected wave that crashed down the tiny pool of the early survivors. The inland migration continued. Pools gave way to ponds, and the world of the primitive wranglers expanded to unparalleled size. It reminds me of some kind of parasites that clings into the sea turtles. Reminds me of them as well. The ponds became host to numerous races of insects, and it provided food resources that had not been available in the shallow pools. Life was better. But life on the primordial green world was a never-ending battle for survival. It was demanding, it was grueling, and it meant death to any creature who gave up the battle or who was simply too weak. Over millions of years, the tiny insect continued its battle to survive. Poor thing. Its life on the land was spent constantly searching for food while attempting to survive the deadly rays of the suns above. The dry mud traps and the harsh blowing winds. Its life in the water was not much better. The tiny insect was constantly defending itself from other small insect predators who were also fighting to survive their primordial world. All of the tiny primitive creatures fought to eat, and they fought not to be eaten. One day, after eons of struggle and evolution, one tiny serpentine figure sat on a small rock at the edge of the water. As it sat quietly, searching for its next meal, it spotted another smaller creature swimming by in the water below. Without pause and without thinking, it leapt from where it sat onto the unsuspecting creature. In a split second, its small muscles had reached from pure survival instinct. The same survival instinct had caused the tiny wrangler to do the unthinkable. It had left the safety of its perch, and it had pushed itself outward into the sky. And this was an important event, for even though the jump was nothing but a minuscule hope of a fraction of an inch, the success of the action, the fact that the tiny jump had supplied the creature with the food that it needed, had ingrained the behavior into its memory banks. When once again the situation confronted the tiny insect, it did not stop to think, it just reacted again. And it succeeded again. Slowly and surely, as time progressed, the tiny insect learned to perch on its ledge and wait for its next victim. Other insects learned to do the same. Generations later, the little wranglers had learned to leap across the water, skipping and hopping across the surface of the water in their unending search for food. With each success, the wranglers became stronger and quicker and more deadly. After hundreds of thousands of years, their tiny legs became stronger and their bodies became slimmer and more tapered. Swimming had given way to hopping. Short hops had become long leaps. The evolution of insects had taken a giant step forward. This is how you will become a warrior of the stars, Matthew, he said to him. Matthew was caught off guard. He was startled by the words. I do not understand, Pa, he managed to say. You will stop behaving and thinking like a human being bound to the earth. You will begin thinking and acting like a star being. You must leap from the safety of your perch that you call being a human and feel the power of existence as a star being. Think like a star being, Matthew. Do it often, do it many times, do it all the time. If you can do this, the actions and thoughts of a star beings will become natural. They will become a part of your everyday behavior. Then and only then will begin the evolutionary path to become a true star warrior. Matthew pondered the thought. That's why an athlete practices constantly. In time, the practiced emotions become natural. They become instinctual. Incredible to react like a star warrior without thinking. That would be an accomplishment. Bess sat it down again. One day, while he basked in a small rock, sunning itself to make its blood warm, the small insect spotted a tiny creature crawling on the ground below. Reaction is the same instinct that had become part of its existence. It leaped from its perch, and as it had happened so many times before, the surprise of the attack left the victim no chance to defend itself. The learned behavior was rewarding the tiny insect. But this time the leap was different. As it flew through the air, the victim of the attacking insect moved. It moved away. Already in the air, the tiny insect suddenly threw its leg forward, trying to reach for every micromillimeter or distance that it could get, like a grasshopper. And it happened. The small flap of its arms had lifted upwards for but a split second, enough for the insect to still reach its prey. And this was the first act of true flight. Once again, evolution has taken a turn. So he's saying that in order for us to get evolved and then take a leap forward, we have to kill another. Is that the message you try to say here? I don't see how it is evolution to inflict harm and agony to other beings. It is being selfish to me. Maybe I'm being naive or very touchy, but how I want to think. Flap this arm had worked once, so the tiny insect tried this newly acquired skill again. Time and time again, the daring leap from the ledge, accompanied by the flap of his arms, was successful. One flap gave way to two. Two flaps became four. As the tactic was passed on from one generation to another, the leaps became longer as their legs and budding wings grew stronger. And incredibly much, the flapping arms of the tiny insect became lighter and filmy. The primordial tiny insect was evolving a set of wings from a tiny creature with little hairs that propelled it forward through the water to a wriggling swimmer with tiny fins, from a crawler with little legs to a hopper with powerful jumping limbs like a grasshopper, and then to a creature with wings and the power to fly. The primordial flying insect was born, and it was a dragonfly. Matthew was amazed by the story. It was astounding. From a tiny wriggling creature to a flying insect. Amazing, he thought to himself. Simply amazing. Beck kept going. He always kept going. Matthew thought to himself. He's restless. Many other primitive creatures of the pond also learn to fly in the misty green world. Millions of years later, numerous creatures with wings began to move from the ocean's edge farther and farther into the steamy jungles that were inland. Some creatures gave up life in the ponds and stagnant pools altogether, moving into the treetops or the marshy swamps. Others chose to remain near the ponds and lakes that had always been their homes and sanctuary. Dozens of different types of insects now began to move through the lands of the green world and through the skies, bringing life to the unexplored edges of the prehistoric world. Time passed. The winged insects became larger and more complex in their bodily structure. Hundreds of flying insect forms were born in the green world. Many lived for only a few thousand years before dying off, but others established their tiny footholds in the prehistoric primitive world. And here in this primordial world of misty ponds and insects are the roots of the reptilian beings. Matthew said forward, "Oh my God! Oh my God! That's right, reptiles are born from insects." I thought that they were born from, they were from birds. I come from insects now. I don't know. I still guess that they are from insects. Oh, from birds, because their resemblance. If the dinosaurs, we had some kind of birds, Pitor, something like that. Pterosaurus, something like that, was a bird, and I believe that the dinosaurs, which the saurians reptiles come from, originate from birds rather than insects. Why hadn't I seen this before? He wondered. The reptiles are born from insects, of course. No, I don't believe. Not all. No. Not all. They are from birds. Matthew was beside himself. Master Pear saw the interest in the young apprentice suddenly become stronger. "That is good," he said to himself, "that is good." The insect which began to dominate the world of the ponds, Matthew began. Again, it resembled what we call a dragonfly here on earth. A dragonfly, and a pterosaur, something like that. Of this insect. After the butterfly, they are my favorite, and they were my favorite as a child. I would love to play with them because I live near a pond. Just behind my house, there is a pond. Just beside the wall that divided the backyard, there is a pond. And I love to play with them. And they come in several colors. I really love this insect because it reminds me of my childhood. However, I don't know, then the bats come from dragonfly, is it? From insect, because the bat is, the dinosaurs, they were evolved from the bird, and so they did the dracos. I love this insect, they're so beautiful. Oh my God, and a mayfly, oh, so beautiful. Master Pet saw the interest in the young princess suddenly becoming stronger. "That is good," he said to himself, "that's good." The insect which began to dominate the world of the ponds, Matthew, he began. Again, it resembled what we call a dragonfly here on earth. A dragonfly! Matt was even more excited. A dragonfly! And yet it was more, Peck explained. It also had traits like the bee he honored. I don't believe. Holy cow! Matthew and surprised. A dragonfly and a bee combination? What an incredible insult. How come they separate suddenly? They become distinguished one from another. Incredible insect that must have been. What was it called, Master? Did it have a name? I don't believe that's a bee and dragonfly. The ancient ones called the dragonfly bee a cab, Matu. A cab? It's a cultural cab, Matu. Cab. Peck corrected him. It's more like crab bee, like in the sound of the key in Loch Ness Monster. Crab. Crab, the participant repeated crab. Matu tried picturing insect that was a combination of a dragonfly and a bee. Remaining the word of pond, Speck continued his story. The primitive dragonfly bee, the crab, held tight to its little word. The many stagnant shallow ponds along with their surrounding marshy grounds allowed the crab to find food both in the water and on the ground for their offspring and for themselves. The power of flight and the experience of millions of years as a predator species had given them considerable advantage in the hunt and the kill. Their skills and the abundance of food sources and the word of the ponds had allowed them to grow strong. But there were other insects that were involved in the green world, and other ringulars and flying insects that were appearing on the primordial planet. New forms of insect life brought new forms of violence and predation, like the clay mantis, the warrior beetle, even though dragonfly bee were threatened by other hunters. Sure, the clay mantis, and this forced them to become even more vicious. Perry stopped to take a sip of his drink. Matthew sat back. He could see the misty green world in his mind. He could actually see the primordial insects swarming through the mists, and he could imagine the ringulars squirming in the ponds and muddy pools. Everything was green in his images, and it was hot and steamy. The dragonfly bees laid their eggs in still ponds. The eggs were tiny little things that were covered in a jelly-like film. When they were born, the little crabs looked like microscopic scorpions, and as if they had been born of the devil itself. The tiny crab scorpions were instantly ready for battle. They had tails with tiny stingers on the end, and tiny pincer's claws on their forelegs that were constantly pinching at the air. Matthew was astounded and impressed. Devil insects, scary, he thought to himself, and as soon as the tiny crabby dragonfly bees were born, they immediately began to fight with their siblings for their own little territory, with pincers flying and tails jabbing at their nest mates. The scorpion-like babies were vicious and deadly, and between the battles of their brothers and sisters, the crab infants fed on the passing mites and tiny organisms that floated by in the water. These were dragonfly bee infants, a form of reptilian insect that was vicious in its hold on life and unwilling to surrender into anything without a battle. But as dangerous as the dragonfly bees were, the developing new world and its many new creatures that existed beyond its pond brought constant dangers and challenges to their existence. So the dragonfly laid their eggs in still pond They begin again. The eggs are tiny little things that were covered in a jelly-like film. When they were born, the little crab looked like microscopic scorpions. And if they had been born of the devil itself, the tiny crab scorpions were instantly ready for battle. They had tails with tiny stingers on the end and tiny pincer claws on their forelegs that were constantly pinching at the air. But was astounded and depressed. "Devil insect is scary," he thought to himself. As soon as the tiny crab dragonfly were born, they immediately began to fight their siblings for their own little territory. The pincers fly and tails jabbing at their nest mates. The scorpion-like babies were vicious and deadly, and between the battle with their brothers and sisters, the crab infants fed on the passing mites and tiny organisms that floated by the water. These were dragonfly bee infants, a form of reptilian insect that was vicious in its hold on life and unwilling to surrender to anything without a battle. But as dangerous as the dragonfly bees were, the developing new world and its many creatures that existed beyond its point brought constantly danger and challenges to their new existence. Other insects were changing and adapting to the jungle environment. They evolved new offensive and defensive tactics, and they too increased their size and strength. The crab were slowly being caught and overpowered. Without a change, the death of the dragonfly bee species was not far away. Matt was hard-pressed to believe that these devil insects would die away. But life is adaptation. That's the rule of the green world, and it's the rule of the galaxy, and it's the rule of life in the universe. And no one knows how or why, but somehow the dragonfly bees did something that creatures had ever done before. In order to survive, the dragonfly bees learned to make two complete transformations of its own form during its lifetime, two complete changes of its body. The first transformation occurred as the scorpion infants reached the age of maturity. After crawling to a branch of a rock, the tiny dragonfly bee infant attached the scorpion-like body firmly and securely to a ledge. When its outer skin hardened into a tough shell, its inner organ began to change. When finally the young dragonfly bee emerged, it no longer had the form of a tiny scorpion. Now it looked more like a mantis. Gone was the wriggling, stinging water infant. Born was the stalker who scurried over the land, looking more and more like the deadly reptile that would eventually become. In its new form, the developed young crab boned its predatory skills. I find insect very cute. It often came to visit me when I first got married and got my house. It came often to my house, and I look at it from far away and I was a bit scared because he always moved his body and moved his claw like you want to attack, something like that. No wonder the reptiles and the play mantis are very close together because they make part of one another. A chill went through Matthew. If this was the ancestor creature of the reptilian beings, then good God, that's exactly why I interrupted Matthew's thoughts. But this was only the first transformation that the dragonfly bee would undergo, Matthew. In the second stage after shedding its outer shell, the maturing dragonfly bee emerged with long limbs, claws, and a stinger that was more highly developed, and also came out with a double set of wings and a multi-purpose long snout. In its new form, the crab was far more efficient, flying and killing machine. This was the reptilian insect, the dreaded dragonfly bee, the true crab. It was this creature that would eventually rise into the skies of the green world and conquer it completely. Matthew could believe that. As the adult dragonfly bees flew through the air, they looked like armored mosquitoes. They had external skeletons that were made of hardened bony shell. The plates protect their vulnerable internal organs and made them nearly invisible opponents in the fly insect wars. They were truly frightening. They had 4 powerful wings that lift them through the air, each wing moving independently of the others. Because of this, the adult crab could hover in a place to quickly move forwards or backwards. They could dash and dart through the air with a skill that was unmatched by other insects. It had long arms with small but powerful claws that allowed it to cling to leaves and branches to grasp the female end of its hapless victims. With one quick slash of its claws, the dragonfly bee could kill its enemy or rip open the body of its prey. Then, standing over the still body, it could insert its long snout into the body and suck greedily at the once life-giving fluids of its victim. Matthew shuddered at the vampire-like mantis that he envisioned in his mind. In the early days of life in the green world, the dragonfly bee, the crab, a primitive form of reptilian insect, was the single most intimidating enemy any flying creatures could meet. Matthew was sure that it was true. In the final stage of their lives, after the second shedding of their skins, the crab had become full-fledged adults. At this time in their lives, the females were ready to conceive, ready to bear offspring. But in order to bear their young, the internal organs of the females had changed even more dramatically than the systems of the males. Where once the females could survive on the nectar of plants or on the flesh of other insects, now the females needed to feed on the bodily fluids of other creatures in order to produce the chemicals in their body. There's some mosquitoes that would permit conceptions. The females needed to feed on the bodily fluids and the blood of other creatures. Damn, Matthew thought to himself, more and more like vampires. No, that's mosquito. After the female crab gorged themselves in the blood of other creatures, they returned to their nest to wait the change. When they were ready, they rose up into the sky, fly as high as they possibly could, and awaited the approach of the droning males. By rising as high as they could in the sky, the females were assured that only the strongest and the most determined males would be able to reach them. This would ensure that they would have a strong and vitally healthy offspring, capable of mating several times. The females remained in their heavenly place until they were filled female seed. Then, by descending to their chosen ponds, the females deposited their eggs and returned to their nests, and the cycle began again. This was the way of life of the ancestors of the reptilian beings of our heavens. Matthew said quietly, human beings, born of ancestors that were dragonfly bees. Who would ever believe that? I don't believe, but then we are descended of some form of primate. He thought to himself, perhaps not an ape, but a relative of the apes and the chimpanzees. I don't believe. And the primates came from our foothood creatures who lived in the trees millions of years ago. And where did they they come from if not from a primitive reptilian creature? No, it's not so far-fetched. No, 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 no such thing. Something wrong here in this formation. Matthew thought to himself, we too have a reptilian cortex. Yeah, of course we do, but because something have been manipulated and recreated from the original. How about that, Matthew? In our brain. Would it be so wrong to call ourselves reptilian humanoids? The Homo sapiens too, yeah, but I mean partly, not all fully, but not our ancestors. No, not them. He wondered. No, he said to himself, I think not. Peg gazed at the window. Over the billions of years of its evolution, the dragonfly bee became larger, and as it evolved into this larger form, the first sign of its humanoid destiny began to show itself. Its long appendages began to look more like long gangly arms and legs. Its thorax took the form of a torso with a pinched waist, and its triangular head with its huge crystalline eyes began to taper and look more human. Here, after they go laboratory changes, how about that? By force, let's say induce in the air, it looked like a miniature primitive human being with wings. Not quite a fairy, perhaps more like a fury, as it sat in a tree, silently waiting for its innocent victim to fly by overhead. It looked like a dark gargoyle. Oh brother, all this created in labs. A gargoyle. So ugly. Matthew sat back. The images in his head were frightening, but sources of food were not the only to be found in the sky. There was also prey that walked on the ground. Larger wings had helped the crab to become efficient hunters in the air, but the large wingspans had also restricted movement in dense forests and thick brush. Sheer survival demanded that the reptilian dragonfly bee humanoids learn to hunt in the ground. By tucking its wing in close to its body, the crab learned that it could run quickly through the trees. Its legs and lower extremities adapted to movement on the ground, and its clawed feet became more flexible. Its backbone adapted to erect movement, and its tail all but disappeared. And although its new form allowed it to become a deadly predator on the ground in the forests and jungles, its upper torso and wings never lost the incredible ability to lift the creature up into the sky and dart through the air. They sound like dragon people, Matthew said out loud. But yes, it's an image that's appropriate. Were they really reptile pair? Yes, Matthew. They were winged reptilian creatures on their way to becoming humanoids. Were they cold-blooded, Master? I wonder if we are reptilian really. We are from reptiles that have evolved, are we? Or they are talking about other galaxies, other constellations, and not Earth itself, and this is being come from there to here and invaded here. Maybe, who knows? That's correct, Matthew, the elder answered. Scales and plates do not keep the heat of the body in very well, as even the reptiles of Earth must do. The early herb had to sun themselves often. It was also their practice to live in the warm regions of the world, tropical. That explains tropicality. You say they had scales? The young British asked. Yes, in the beginning. Eventually they lost their scales and their bony shell covering. You see, for many millions of years, the primitive male crab had bony plates all over his body and his arms and legs, much like the dinosaurs of Earth. In the long ago prehistoric eras, they had a ridge of short plates with semi-sharp edges that began near their forehead, through the back and over their skull and down their backs, gradually tapering down on their short, slender tail. They also had long, sharp claws on its hands that they were developing. They could cut and rip with savage quickness, and they had large square jaws with sharp, rigid teeth that could cut a limb off with one snapping bite. Oh my gosh. They had powerful legs that let them run quickly and leap through the air with extraordinary speed and agility. Their emotionless black eyes could intimidate the hardest enemy warrior. And remember, they could fly. The drone crab were among the most vicious creatures of the green world. I really hope that this green world were in ERIDANUS and not Earth, but ERIDANUS. Okay? Because Earth before was blue color and not green. Green became later. Alright? So I do hope that this green world war not here on Earth is a lie. Earth was blue. All over. Vegetations to sea to sky. They could rip their emotionless black eyes could intimidate the hardest enemy warrior. And remember, Matthew, there is no doubt of it that he thought to himself, and they were black, Matthew. That's cool. Ben narrowed his eye, looking straight into Matthew's eyes. Their bodies were a deep black. In the darkening sea, the male drones were nearly invisible, hid in the blackness of night. An attack by male drones was both fierce and merciless, descending with stunning speed and quickening seal in enemy nests or bands of growling creatures. Attacks by dragonfly females seldom failed, born with the instinct of dragonfly drones. Crab males would continue to fight, even if their heads had been cut off. Enemy drones who survived the initial surprise attack of the crab had a little chance of living through the subsequent onslaught. Time and time again, the lightning attacks of the drone dragonfly beasts succeeded, and time again, they expanded their primordial insect lands. But they no more attack humans. It's very, very rare for them to attack humans. Maybe they do attack, but in a very subtle way, in a ephemeral, subtle way. It's not a dense way. I mean that they are not invisible. Per leaned forwards. Here is a black gargoyle. But as feared as the crab males were, the females were even more terrifying to the creatures of the green world. In their evolution, as the females were developing into humanoids, they remained smaller than the males, and they had smaller plate covering on their bodies, with exposed areas that were covered with a fine, fuzzy hair. But their lack of armor did not make them less dangerous. Their claws were still sharp, and their small size made them quicker and faster than their male counterparts. But there was something else, he said. Matthew listened with anticipation. They were poisonous. Matthew made a face. Poisonous! He wondered. Poisonous! Are they not deadly enough already? They feel a need to become poisonous. Yeah, because they want to defend themselves, make sure that uh, they were red enough to fight for male, so they become poisonous. It was not the Earth, it was Orion, it was an ERIDANUS. It's another galaxy, it's not the Earth. Over the billions of years of the evolution, something happened to the female crab that did not happen to the males. The changes in their bodies that produced the hormones necessary for the production of offspring also produced the fluid that was acidic and highly poisonous to other creatures. Of course, they created in a laboratory what their scientists. The crab females could protect themselves in their nests by spitting unnatural venom into the eyes and faces of their victims. It's like the cobra, a stream of hot acidic fluid that struck the face of an enemy could cause nerve-numbing paralysis or blindness. If there was an open wound or the venom entered the gullet of the victim, death was almost always certain. The woe be to any enemy that felt the fangs of the female crab. So much while the crab drones could draw blood with their bites, well, they are vampire. That in and of itself did not cause death. But the crab females, because of their natural venom, the females could kill with but the slightest scratch from their fangs. The battle between the evolving creatures of the green world and the crab males always heavily favored the dragonfly bees. But when the areas near the crab nest were endangered or threatened, the destructive fury of the females always produced a victory. True, this might sound almost trite, Matu, in this galaxy, it is the female of the species that should be feared. It's the female of the species that is the most deadly. Pass sat back, letting his words sink in. Chills went up Matu's back. It's good for the feminine side here if there is some kind of female here right now and this earth, because they take for granted the naivety and the vulnerability of the females here on earth. I wish they have some kind of how to say, gargoyle kind of females here. Then they will see. The idea that there were swarms of drones descend on him was frightening. Facing a man-sized dragonfly was also terrifying. But the thought of a hand-to-hand battle with a female that looked like a gargoyle and who had saliva that could kill, that was too much. Lord, Matu thought to himself, I hope I never have to confront one. Then a thought occurred to him. But that was millions of years ago. Is that not so, Master? No, there is still some. There is still some, even on Earth. They come from Earth, they invaded. However, they have evolved. Mentally wise and consciousness wise, they have evolved. They don't look at you and then straight away attack. Many people have seen gargoyle and yet they don't attack. Because consciously speaking, they have evolved. But their agenda here is not yet known. They may not attack, but they kind of they pursue they influence others to do one with another, do a natural kind of killing. Okay, they pursue, they kind of influence the mentality of the others to do what they want to do, because if just a snap, they will kill one of us. Just a snap of a claw. And one another world in a faraway star system, is that not right? So, yes, that's how they appeared many years ago, millions of years ago. They no longer look quite as frightening as they once did. Matu was relieved. No, they still are very scary, but they don't have appear to kill. What do they look like now, master? Well, Matthew, resumed his story, in the early stage of the evolution of the crab, they look like strange armored mantis humanoids. But over the millions of years, their bodies became tall and lanky. Their arms and legs were long and slender. That one, the slender man. Those slender men are these creatures. And it is real. It is very, very, very real. It's no joke. It is real. It's a mix of a reptilian and a mantis. It's not fiction at all. I think that they are miserable creatures. Those that become tall and lanky, slender, their arms and legs very long and slender, the torso with the pinched waist that's so familiar to bees and dragonflies, give way to a humanoid body with a small waist. It's like they having that pincers come out in the sides. Their large triangular heads developing into a more rounded head with a tapering pointed square chin. That's what I call the boogeyman. The huge black eyes that had once dominated the entire head became large, dark, fishing eyes. Matthew shuddered. He was sure he had seen one of them in town early in the month. The early crab humanoids stopped and smiled. Matthew wondered what happened. Are you okay, master? The early crab humanoids were the equivalent of our cavemen, Matthew. I guess they could be called crab man and crab woman, he smiled. Matthew smiled too. Another good one, master. Another good one. The early crab humanoids were tall and rather slender, but their slim build was deceptively powerful. They were very limber and fast, capable of running on narrow trails and pass through thin passages. And they could fly up and down, side to side, and so fast that they seemed a blur. They were efficient and deadly hunters, and they were cold-blooded killers. They are cold-blooded killers. Of all the species that would evolve on the green world, it was the reptilian bee humanoids, the crab, who would rise to become the most dominant life form of the world. I'll bet. As the crab humanoids evolved, as it happened on Earth, they formed primitive societies that eventually became civilizations. What? As the crab humanoid evolved, as it happened on Earth, it happened on Earth, but Earth was not theirs. Earth was another thing. They formed primitive societies that eventually became civilizations. They evolved from a primordial nest existing sea to primitive mud huts and shelters, and then to large sophisticated cities. From a life struggling in a pond to life as a reptile, and then to life as a humanoid, from tiny gurgles to buzzing, and then to complex sea languages, from muddy nests to glyphs to magnificent art, and from bustling to markets, and then to complex financial institutions. The primitive reptilian insect humanoid gave way to sophisticated reptilian men. The reptilian people had become civilized. Matthew wondered if the path of development had the same throughout the universe, if all of the beings of the galaxy followed the same trail. And he wondered, do the reptilian people, the herb, look like snake people, mantis people, master? They do. He asked, do they still have scales? Peregrine, yeah, they have, some have. They have. Some still maintains their old appearance. No, Matthew, he shook his head. As human beings on Earth have lost the large amount of hair, we don't have this. That's nonsense. That their primate ancestors once had. That's nonsense. So too the reptilian being had lost their scales. Nonsense. There's some scale. Are they green, master? Yeah, they are green. They are green. They are green. Some are green, some are brown. Some are blacks. No, my young friend. They are not green skin. They never were. Their dark skin no longer have scales, and they do not look like the insect reptiles that they are descended of. No, it's lie. They still remain. Or they are reviving the past. I don't know. They're still on the old timeline. Wow! But I wonder what... Hold it, Pep began again. As the millions of years of their evolutions continued to go by, the heavy people lost most of the very distinct reptilian insect features of their ancestors. But not all their physical traits disappeared entirely. Yeah, that's the truth. Though their height began to vary slightly, the heavy people generally remained tall and quite slender. And as in the case of all beings born of reptilian ancestors, they possessed little or no hair on their bodies, and they had very little hair on their heads. Their torsos retained the hourglass shape of the long ago dragonfly bee ancestors. Oh my gosh! Males had broad chests with narrow waists, large and powerful buttocks with strong thighs and tapering coats. Reptilian females had the same shape, but with a more delicate and feminine curve to their bodies. Their faces were still triangular, tapering to a pronounced jet soft point. They had large dark eyes, larger than most humanoids, but they possessed almost hypnotizing beauty. Their mouths were also larger than most beings, but with smaller lips. When closed, the mouths of the reptilian people seemed almost to disappear, and although they had lost the extremely large fangs of their ancestors, their eyes, teeth were still long and sharp, and quite functional. The long proboscis used to drain the blood of their victims was also gone. It had given away to an angular nose, sharp and narrow, and it too was strangely appealing. It may surprise you, Matthew, but the reptilian people were a physically beautiful people. Their limbs were graceful, their bodies were alluring and shapely, and with their large dark eyes and fluid walk, the reptilian females were known to be some of the most beautiful human in the galaxy. Yeah, beauty in the eyes of the beholder, Taro. The reptilian people were handsome and fearsome, beautiful and deadly, and they could fly. In ceremony, when dressed in their flowing robes and satanism, flowing robes, the best finery their world had to offer, the male and female reptilian could hover lightly, as if in angelic wings. Also they wear hood, often they appear with hoods on, but they wore the hand of death itself, hidden in shining gossamer. Yeah, so you see appearance deceives, and not always things that glitters is gold. Devils that look like angels, amazing thought, Matu. Or perhaps I should think of them more like angels that act like devils. Over the billions of years of the evolution of the green world, how come I should think of them more like angels that act like devils? How come they are angels when angels are supposed to do good? Hmm? If you say you are an angel but you do bad, then you are not angels anymore. Over the billions of years of the evolution of the green world, many races of reptilian people had evolved. As it has happened on every world in our galaxy of ERIDANUS, the races went to war of their own world. Without fail, the success or failure of the reptilian armies always hinged on the extraordinary ability of the drone warriors to the maneuver and flight. Males and females alike could fly on wings that seemed far too delicate to carry their lanky bodies. They were exceptionally quick on the ground, but in the air the reptilians had no peer. From a distance, the approaching arms of flying warriors looked like a huge black cloud of giant dragonflies. So they are black, but those they are green and brown. They are also brown right now. A faint angry buzzing betraying their intents. But even though the enemy might visually detect them while still some distance away, in the blink of an eye, the reptilian winged warriors covered the ground and separated them from their enemies. In less than a heartbeat, the viciousness of the reptilian warrior descended on its enemy like the wrath of a cruel and bloodthirsty god. Though they would eventually lose their natural bony covering because of the forces of evolution, the reptilian drone warriors compensated for the loss by wearing fabricated body plate armor, much like the knights of the Middle Ages and Earth story. While the loss of natural body armor had made them somewhat more vulnerable, the loss of the body plates had also made the reptilian warriors lighter and quicker, and therefore more deadly. Damn, Matsu thought to himself. Why do they keep getting deadlier? Do they ever develop some sort of weakness? See? Perry noticed Matsu and stopped. No, Elder, Matsu apologized. It's nothing, I'm sorry. Perry sat back and continued. The world wars of the reptilian humanoids were many, Matsu. The balance of power swung back and forth between many aspiring realms. Empires and kingdoms rose and fell, but in time one race of reptilian people surfaced as the dominant people of the planet. They were known as the Neck, or the fearsome Black Ones. Though the victory of the Black Warriors and the political manipulations of the Black Kings, the world of the reptiles was eventually united under one king and one kingdom. Matthew repeated the name to himself, the Neck, the Black Ones. Yeah, it's scary. So they come here to us, huh? gosh, here's the black ones. But maybe they're not much. I don't know whether they are like this really every time. But I have met with some in 2020, September to August, and they are so aggressive. Sometimes the appearance are human, a black man, but they are not quite human. They are reptilian. And they come to me and ask me to make a stand because I had to make a stand, he said, and together with them, once a lot of beings around, and they asked me to take a stand. And he didn't really give me a choice. Actually, he told me, "You are not to stay on their side. You stay for our side. I want you to stay in our side," because they were against this one, the albino dragons. This one, he wants Deus. He's very quiet. He don't like to say anything. He just look. That black dragon was against this one. Say that they were no good, and I shouldn't follow them, and I was not following anything. Or maybe this one was the one influencing me. And he told me not to follow this white dragon and to follow them, and since the white ones was quiet, I would rather follow the white one, because the one who is quiet doesn't make a stand, maybe the ones who, well, is the one who you should not say trust, but the one who talks so much, the one that you should trust less. She's beautiful. He's so beautiful. The female, of course, they're not like that. Small lips, as the man said. But they are more delicate. So is it for now, and later we shall discuss about the role of these beings and the feminist sides here on earth. Why it's so prevalent here, and what the Queen of Orion has to do with it. I'm not saying that she's behind all that, but her enemies